Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Masood Raja, and today I'll briefly talk about another book, this time from India, one of my most favorite epic novels of India by Qurratulain Hyder, and it's called River of Fire. Now, I do have a detailed sort of an academic exchange about this book on my other channel, which you can obviously watch if you are into a more scholastic discussion of the book, and I'll post the link in the description. But here I just want to introduce the novel and encourage you to give it a try. If you are interested in reading a novel that carries the story of India, 2000 years of it, of course, not coherently as one single narrative, but in a complex web of storytelling. Now, the original novel was published in Urdu in 1959 and became an instant success, like immediately got huge reviews and was considered one of the greatest novels of Urdu literature. And then Qurratulain Hyder herself was a towering figure of Urdu writing in India, in Pakistan, and in the rest of the Urdu-speaking world, wherever it is read, taught, or spoken. And she lived a long life. She was a feminist. She never married and had a wonderful life where everyone who visited Delhi would go and pay homage to Qurratulain Hyder. And so she herself translated the novel, which was published in 1919, and she calls it a transcreation. And this is the original New Directions hardbound copy. You can actually also order it in paperback. And she calls it a transcreation and not a translation because there are quite a few things in the Urdu version which she either truncates or omits. So keep that in mind. If you pick up this novel, please remember that this novel will make you struggle through because you will have to look up a lot of references, a lot of allusions that she uses. But the most important technique that she uses in the novel is she uses 4 or 5 recurrent characters who appear at different stages in India's history, not as repeat of the characters before, only the names are similar. But that's one thing that runs through the novel. Now, the title, River of Fire, doesn't come from Hindu mythology or anywhere else. It actually comes from one of T.S. Eliot's poems, The Three Salvages, which she had translated in Urdu and cited in the Urdu version, but omits from the English transcreation. Roughly, the novel has 4 parts. We start in the prehistoric 2nd century BC India, right? And our main character, one of the characters, Gautam Neelambar, is the one we encounter who is a student and studying the Brahmanic law, right? And then as we follow his life, he becomes an artist. He becomes a public stage player, which we call the Natak players. And eventually, as he dies, she gives us about a 1800-year jump and brings us straight to the 16th century when Muslim invaders have started coming in and they have built their small kingdoms and principalities, and India has then sort of renegotiated a new identity where some areas are governed by Muslims, some areas are governed by Hindus, and we have new characters still named Gautam and Kamaluddin who move through that story, and we get to learn the history especially of the kingdom of Lucknow, right? Then the second jump in the story is when she is right in the 18th, late 18th, early 19th century, and the British and East India Company have entered India, and what kind of India exists and what kind of lives are recurring characters like Gautam, Kamal, and Champak, who is in all the 4 stages, what kind of lives they have as young people growing in British India. And then the last and the longest section of the novel deals with the Indian freedom movement and the creation of India and Pakistan, which is called the partition. That is actually the largest chunk of the novel, and we encounter some new characters. Talat, she is the main force of that part of the novel. She is kind of slightly autobiographical. People say that Qurratulain Hyder modeled her on her own life, and these are these bunch of friends who hang out together, go to college together, and they hang out at Talat's home. This is a middle-class family, and we are made privy to a multicultural society in which young people, regardless of their religion or even class, come together in this cosmopolitan India. And then that life is sundered by the 1947 partition of India between India and Pakistan. So if you read it carefully, you will realize that she gives us a history of resilient, unbroken strain of different histories of India marching towards the present, and the partition then comes across as this severing of that history and bifurcation of Indian history and narratives into India and Pakistan. That's how I read it. So that's roughly the plot. Now, what kind of an audience is it written for? Is it for everyone? I would say no. It's obviously for someone who is a daring reader, someone who wants to take a risk and wants to read a story which is stylistically different, but which draws on a lot of historical and philosophical allusions which are not necessarily Western, even though there are some Western philosophers and scholars mentioned in there. So it needs a reader who is curious, a reader who has no problem reading a text that is dealing with tropes and histories of another culture, not American or British culture. And then a reader who is not afraid of asking questions or looking up materials. So that's the kind of reader that it addresses. But if you read it, right, what kind of a reward you will get? You would, first of all, you could claim that you have read River of Fire, translation of the greatest Urdu novel, Aag Ka Darya. I mean, that's something to be proud of. But you will also learn the techniques and method used by one of the great Urdu writers from India, and how much of it comes across, in her Urdu English transcreation. And also you will learn about these little nuggets of information that she intersperses in the novel, historical accounts of people's lives, historical accounts, let's say, of the Queen of Awadh, Hazrat Mahal, who fights against the British, and her story, stories that you would have otherwise not encountered, stories that are not part of the mainstream narratives, in the Western world, in America or in Britain. These are some of the things that you will gain from this book. Now, please do keep in mind that this book requires a dedicated, careful reading, and you will need time to do this. You cannot pick this book up to read on a plane, right? Or to just casual reading. You have to be committed to it. And you will have to be patient, because at times, maybe because of the translation, the narrative might feel like convoluted or overcomplicated. But if you give it your time and if you're patient with it, I can promise you that after you finish the book, you will tell yourself that this probably is the greatest novel ever written about India and ever transcreated into English. So that's all I have to say about River of Fire, just to introduce you to, this time, a text from India, a transcreated, translated novel from India by Qurratulain Hyder, one of the greatest Urdu novelists and writers from India. I'll be back with more. And as I said previously, if you want a more scholastic and scholarly explanation of the book, please visit the link to my other channel where I do have a longer conversation about the book in that sense of the discussions of the book. So thank you so much for being a part of this journey, and as always, I'll come back with more. And if you have any questions, any comments, post them in the comment section and I'll be happy to answer them. I'll be happy to reply to them. Take care of yourself, and I will now see you next time. Until then, as always, from me, peace and love.